everyone, I'm Dr. Yosefa Fogel Wruble, and this is One on One, Women Talk Torah, a series brought to you by Matan Women's Institute for Torah Study. Welcome back to a new series on Matan's One-on-One podcast. Starting from Parshat Shmot, we'll be putting out a weekly 30-minute episode on the parasha. Each episode has a twist. Each one aims to highlight a figure, ancient, pre-modern, contemporary, who shares an idea on the parsha. Each week I'll be sitting down with a guest for a short conversation about an idea they are passionate about. To speak about Parashat Bo, I'm honored to be sitting with Rabbanit Rachelle Sprecher Fraenkel, who is the director of Matan's Hilchata program. It's a pleasure.
Shalom. Hi, it's my pleasure.
So let's hear what we have to say this week about Parshat Bo.
Okay, so here we are in Parshat Bo, where we were intended to start, at least according to Rashi, the first Rashi in the Torah, and the Medrash that is based on. We were supposed to start this week with a Chodesh Hazeh Lechem, the first proper mitzvah. We do have some mitzvot in Sefer Bereshit, but they're kind of personal family minhagim, or things that are intended for the whole universe. But a proper mitzvah that's given to Bnei Israel, this is the first. Chodesh Hazeh Lechem, it's the beginning of our Jewish calendar. Mm-hmm.
To establish the beginning of each month as Rosh Chodesh.
And starting with Nisan as the head of the year.
Torah.
Right. And then you ask, so what were we doing like for all these parashot throughout Bereshit, the beginning of Shemot? To me, it echoes a bit the one of the polemics with the Christian world. The question of, Christians sanctify these books, but found that we're exempt from the mitzvot somehow. So it's interesting because we keep on saying, yes, our way is, or Jewish way is, the Torah is interested in one's heart, in what goes on in your world of values and world of thought and machshava, etc. But the way to your heart is through practical mitzvot. You do, and then you become. And the time we spend throughout Sefer Bereshit somehow also tells another story. It says sometimes we directly approach the world of values. We speak about family values. We speak about history. We speak about how it all began. And from there we get to the commitment to mitzvot. And then from the mitzvot we get back to the heart. So it's like a circular motion. So it's like we say, Rachman Ali Babai, HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants the heart. But he doesn't only want the heart. It's like a motion from the practical world of mitzvot to the heart, from the heart to the practical world of mitzvot. So there's like a dialogue going on here.
Right, that's a really beautiful idea. You're saying we should move away from the dichotomy of, the Christian world focuses on actions and beliefs and the Jews focus on behavior. And you're saying just the structure of the way the Torah is written reflects that it is much more nuanced than that. Meaning, of course, we have our mitzvot and our obligations, but it's encased in a world of values. It's encased in a world of family. I always go back to, in my heart, in my soul, in my teaching, Rabbi Sachs' introduction to the book of Sefer Bereshit, where he speaks about the fact that the first spiritual blueprint of our life is with our family. We meet God at a later age in our life, but all the basis of a foundation of our life is through our family, and that is simply why the Torah has to start with family. But you're saying that it's this beautiful, it's a circle that feeds itself. It's the obligations, it's the values, and it's something that they all make each part richer.
Definitely. And the first Rashi on the Torah, that very famous question of why tell us this whole story. We're actually here for a book of law. Let's get practical. Let's get down to Tachlis mitzvot. Reflects this notion. He takes the answer to a different direction. But here we are finally at the place he was pointing us to. And we look at the Psukim, chapter 12, chapter 13 of Sefer Shmot, Parshat Bo. And something very interesting is going on because, once we get the first mitzvah, they come in bunches. You get a whole series of mitzvot. And the situation is one where we're just before Yetziat Mitzrayim. We're just before the last plague of Makat Bechorot. And and we're getting the instructions. So these psukim are all about. We start out with a chodesh hazeh lachem. You're going to get your head of the year in Nisan, and then we're told all about what's going to happen. There's going to be makat bechorot, and Hashem says it's going to go from home to home and see differentiate between the houses of Israel and the Egyptians. And then while this is, nothing has happened yet. We're just getting the instructions. And there's a lot of talk about the redemption that is going to happen from Mitzrayim. And while these instructions go on throughout these chapters 12 and 13, it seems like from the very beginning, the Torah is much more busy with how this story is going to be told once it's done than actually being there. It's like sometimes we tease our teenagers that before they're at the situation, they're already taking pictures and posting it online. And we say, oh no, just, why don't you experience it?
Experience it.
And here it seems like the Torah is doing exactly that. It's saying, okay, so this is what's going to happen, etc. And while it's saying that, it says, and you're going to be telling this story, and you're going to be having this holiday called Pesach, and in this Pesach, you're going to tell this story, and you're going to remember this, and when your children will ask you what went on, you're going to be answering like this and like that, and it goes on and on and on with a whole bunch of new mitzvot that come up one after the other, and with this almost obsession with how this story is going to be told, okay, before it's even experienced.
It's a great parallel to the world of social media. I have to make sure that it looks good before I actually enjoy it or experience it. And I think that you're pointing to this idea that the consciousness of the Exodus is in many ways much more powerful than the actual moment itself, meaning the mark it leaves on the Torah as being a model for human dignity and being a model for kindness, that the Exodus is something that is so strongly part of our biblical and ultimately Jewish consciousness that you're saying the Torah itself shows that it's self-aware in that moment. Like, I'm so self-aware right now how it's going to sound, how it's going to look, that there's this 2 prakim break almost from the actual events of the story. And then it skips part of the story, by the way, and it jumps into another part.
I absolutely agree. It's like saying there's this major historical event. There's going to be the Exodus. But more than the Exodus shaped the face of Am Yisrael and Torah and etc., the memory of the Exodus shaped Am Yisrael. And that is, it screams out from these psukim because it's all over here. It's really, once you read it in these eyes, you see how it's blunt. And then you go into the actual new mitzvot that come up here. And there's a whole series of mitzvot that come up immediately, starting with everything that has to do with Yetziat Mitzrayim, with Pesach, with telling the story of Yetziat Mitzrayim, etc., etc., and a bunch of other ones like Pidyon Ben, like Tefillin, and you start first of all experiencing these few mitzvot, and then you get connected to this whole series, actually, I think maybe over 36 places where mitzvot that are instructed by the Torah are said to be Zecher L'Yetziat Mitzrayim. And it's part of a vast system of mitzvot Zecher L'Yetziat Mitzrayim, and we start analyzing this system. You see, it's some are very simple, so we're going to sit down on Pesach, we'll tell the story, we'll remember Yetziat Mitzrayim, we'll remember Yetziat Mitzrayim every day, eventually we'll remember Yetziat Mitzrayim every night, and things, the whole system of holidays that, Sukkot, and okay, fine. And then we go on to Shabbat. And I remember as a child, I always, in Kiddush, I always understood why Shabbat is Zecher L'Maaseh Bereshit. It has to do with creation. But why is it Zecher L'Yetziat Mitzrayim? And it took, another step to say, the social aspects of Shabbat, the fact there's this concept of rest, the fact that you can control time and what you do with time, and that was less intuitive to me. But it's something we grow up with from the very beginning. And here, right in our psukim, there is tefillin. What does tefillin have to do with Yetziat Mitzrayim? So you say, on the one hand, within the tefillin themselves, we have, it's like a loop, because they include these psukim.
Yeah, they're inside.
And this concept of Bizroa Chazakah, like with the strong arm that HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and then it goes, it becomes greater and greater, and you find mitzvot that's sometimes very hard to explain why it's Zecher L'Yetziat Mitzrayim. You're not allowed to cheat on your scales. Zecher L'Yetziat Mitzrayim. What does that have to do? Eventually, when you analyze it, I think there are, and I'm back to the circular motion. You can't see it on a podcast, but
she's making a circular motion with her hands.
Like a good Jew, I'm speaking with my hands. On the first hand, there is this whole system of mitzvot that are there to create the consciousness of a people that left Mitzrayim, a people that were slaves, a people that were redeemed, telling the story. And that's all, there are many, many mitzvot that are supposed to build this memory, to build this consciousness. And then once you have this consciousness, it's part of who you are, it's part of your identity, there is the whole series of mitzvot that build on that to create a better society. Like, once you're aware of who you are and where you came from, you're already expected to be sensitive to the weaker parts of society, and to be honest, and to be good to the Gael, to the Yatom, to the Almana, etc., etc., etc. And to me, it's like we spoke about Sefer Bereshit. There's like a world there that's out to build a certain consciousness, a certain value system. And then once you have that value system, or you have at least a beginning of that kind of consciousness, there are more and more mitzvot that build on that to create a better world, to create a better society, to interact with that.
Right. If I can understand what you're saying, it's not just what we usually think of the consciousness of the Exodus, which is that it's supposed to make us kinder people, but you're saying it actually is there at the foundation, meaning it builds the foundation of who we are as individuals and as a nation. And then it also is still there to play a role in a higher level of consciousness, meaning first it has to create who we are as knowing that we are part of a people, that we are bound by a joint historical experience, and by an experience that was also experiencing God's involvement directly in human history. And then Mitzrayim functions on another level, which is to actually impact our actions once we have created that individual and collective identity.
Yes, to me it comes back to this place where Rahman Ali Babai, God wants the heart, but it's not some abstract idea. It's through deeds you create the proper heart, mm-hmm. and through that proper heart you create more deeds, mm-hmm. that affect society, and it's like a circle that feeds itself. And it's like, sometimes it's described as a spiral motion in Jewish history, where eventually you go back to these psukim and you say, what's this obsession about telling the story before it even happened? And you say what we just said a couple of minutes ago, that even more than this great historical event shaped who we are, the telling of the story, the acting out of the story, the living it out throughout our lives shaped us as a nation, which turns out to be a big, big deal.
Yeah, I'll just add in there, just to interrupt for a moment, which is that there's a really, really important work. It's called Zachor. It was written by Professor Yosefa Yerushalmi, who was a professor in Columbia. He passed away. And it's a series of essays that were first spoken as a series of lectures, and it's called Zachor, Jewish History and Jewish Memory. And his first lecture in the book really focuses on this idea in the biblical world, in that we don't have history. We didn't have history that was written. We have very, I would say, random and unconventional stops along the way. You had, Josephus to a certain degree writing history, but in all of the biblical and post-biblical time, you really didn't have any until even the Middle Ages, if you can even call that history. But we had very strongly this idea of Jewish memory, of the of the commandment, right? The commandment to remember, which is a very different way. It's a way of living history as opposed to remembering it in the past. And the concept of writing down history, which, Chazal include many historical facts. They're all throughout the Mishnah and the Gemara, but it's not ever recorded as history because history puts it in the past tense to a certain degree. And we live with a constant present awareness that these are events that happen and they keep happening in all different ways.
Right. So my favorite way of expressing that same idea is a story I heard from Avram Infeld. He is a Jewish educator that worked a lot with Tfutzot and the diaspora. And I heard him a couple of times telling the story how when he was a young man, he just graduated high school, and he comes from a family of physicists, and he was raised to be, he says, a physicist to shame Einstein. He knew what he was supposed to be, and then the state of Israel was established. And his father told him, "You're a young man. There's a new state of Israel. Go ahead." And he wasn't prepared. He said, "You're a young man, new state, go." So he was very strongly encouraged to go study in the Hebrew University. And as he got there, he went to the physics department. And he says, so I was studying in the lab for a day and 2 days. And on the third day, I was looking out the window and there was this beautiful young lady walking outside to the Department of Jewish History. So that, he says, was how it happened that I majored in Jewish history. Okay. And she is the grandmother of my children, et cetera, et cetera. Nice end there. But then I had to write to my father and explain what actually happened. And, I let him down after he raised me to be a physicist. And I wrote one of these aerograms, with the small letters. And I waited very tensely to get the answer from my father. And then when my father's answer came, I opened it and I read in between the lines. As I read, I understand my father is furious. And a few lines later, I understand he's not angry at me. He's absolutely furious at the Hebrew you. Why? He says, Jews don't have a history. Jews have memory. And he says, as a young man then, I had no idea what he's talking about. But if we analyze, both what Professor Yerushalmi said and what Avram Infeld said, the difference between history and memory is history is a book on the shelf. You can choose to open it, not to open it, to relate to it, not to relate to it. Memory is your identity. It's what you could argue with it, you can react to it, it's part of who you are. And it's not going anywhere. It's right there with you, living life. And actually there's there's a famous piece by Jonathan Safran Foer about Jewish memory. He says, Jews have 6 senses: touch, taste, sight, smell, hearing, memory. While Gentiles experience and process the world through the traditional senses and the use of memory they use memory only as a second-order means of interpreting events, for Jews, memory is no less primary than the prick of a pin, or its silver glimmer, or the taste of the blood it pulls from the finger. The Jew is pricked by a pin and remembers other pins. It is only by tracing the pinprick back to other pinpricks, when his mother tried to fix his sleeve while his arm was still in it, when his grandfather's fingers fell asleep from stroking his great-grandfather's damp forehead, when Abraham tested the knife point to be sure Isaac would feel no pain, that the Jew is able to know why it hurts. When a Jew encounters a pin, he asks, what does it remember like?
Wow.
Wow, yeah. Basically, it says, memory, it's not just the sum of your past experiences. It's something you live and relive constantly. The structure of all of mitzvot, but especially the ones that we encounter in Bo, is when we look at Leila Seder, it's about acting it out, about having, if we want to feel like Bnei Chorin, like free people. We, in the eyes of Chazal, who are the free people of their time, this Greek meal with laying down. And you actually, you're playing out the role. And while you're playing it out, you find yourself identifying with the role and passing it on. It's like Chayav Adam lir'ot atzmo, to see himself as if he was redeemed, but it's also lar'ot atzmo, like in the Rambam and in the Kitvei Yad, in the manuscripts. And eventually it's the way to pass that identity on, but it must be an ongoing experience. Hasidic thought, the pasuk El Motzi'am Mimitzrayim in the present tense expresses this idea.
Who takes them out of Egypt.
Exactly. Who is taking them out? Expresses this idea that it's an ongoing redemption. They bring this, the parallel to Shabbat. There's this idea, again, expressed by the Or HaChaim, that the first Shabbat was like the summing up of creation, in the sense that there were 6 days of creation and the day of Shabbat, and that day of Shabbat re-energized the world for one more week. And every Shabbat is like recharging the world for one more week of vitality. And in a sense, it recreates the world every week. So Shabbat is not only about remembering Shabbat Bereshit, the original Shabbat, but about recreating the world every week, like in a mystical sense. Sipur Yetziat Mitzrayim similarly is that idea. In every given moment, and there are 50 ways of Zichron Yetziat Mitzrayim, in Leil HaSeder, every day, every night, etc., something is happening now. In a sense, I am being redeemed now. I'm freeing myself from slavery, or being freed by Kadosh Baruch Hu from slavery now. It's something that's happening in a present tense.
Can I ask you what that means, though, for us if we're going to take it in a very, very personal sense? So do we constantly need saving, right? Is it that we're constantly remembering that God is actively engaged in our development, or is it because we need to be released from different forces that are imprisoning us? I mean, that's an image I think I have a little bit of a harder time with. But what does it mean? Meaning, is it that we're supposed to remember through all these very practical and also more mantra type things? We're remembering Mitzrayim all the time because we're remembering that God is part of our active life, and it's another way of sort of expressing divine providence in our daily life. Or does it mean something else, that we constantly need to be redeemed from what?
That's a question I'm busy with. It in a way it becomes more acute every year, close to Leil HaSeder, when I ask myself, in what sense am I telling this story as a current story? What has changed this year from last year, etc.? In that Netivot Shalom, he talks about 50 ways of remembering Yetziat Mitzrayim, and in a way, it's all the above and not all simultaneously. There are times where what you experience is like now in Parshat Shmot we just had. We were asking ourselves, what does it mean not to be in? You'll have to translate this, avodat parech.
Yeah, to be in difficult physical labor. We're not being burdened by that labor.
No, so the question is, if avodat parech is physical labor, there's something about a certain type of work that you do that turns it into parech. And that would not necessarily be the physical side of it. It could be the lack of meaning. It could be the lack of engagement. It could be the lack of choice. And then on the other hand, in a properly enacted life, I'm sure you choose to do things that are not meaningful in every moment, but you might have an ultimate goal, or you might say, okay, I'm doing this, I'm not crazy over it, but I'm bringing food to my family. So here in Parashat Shmot, we were asking ourselves, what does it mean to be free regarding our work? And in other aspects, it would be, how do I experience the existence of a Kadosh Baruch Hu as a redeeming force in my life?
Or how much is the Exodus part of our actual foundational consciousness. Like, I think that that's what you're pointing to in what we've said today, is how much does that historical event feature as something that is a presence in my life, not just something I say in the morning. And the
absolutely.
evening.
So this can be in individual spiritual issues, or how you deal with everyday life, and how you deal with your identity as a national identity, as a Jewish identity, as a Torah Jew identity, and how does this, quote unquote history, shape your current identity and your children's identity, and again, in the everyday choices of life, but also in the second order values and choices regarding my role in society, and being sensitive to whoever needs help, needs an open eye, an open heart from Am Yisrael and outside Am Yisrael. Surely the Exodus became a world symbol of freeing ourselves. Let my people go, etc.
Oppression and freedom.
It continues to be a role of Am Yisrael in the world. Surely it goes from the inside out, from a very personal place to a social place, to a very Am Yisrael place, to light upon the nations. But it's definitely not a book on the shelf. It's it's definitely such a strong player in our identity, and the more we pay attention to it, the more it could act in our life as a positive force, as a force for helping us, seek justice, seek redemption, seek our personal exodus.
Right. What I would be careful of is that I wouldn't want people to look at it. I think Rabbanit Rachelle made a famous song out of, right, that Omdim Alenu L'Chalotenu, that, every day there are those who are trying to make sure that our role is muted in this world. I just wouldn't want us to take it as a piece that victimizes us. I would want us to take it in an empowering way of the consciousness that it creates of the joint experience. But I guess part of me wants to leave a little bit behind. I don't want people to constantly, and there are still many Jewish communities that function like this, that really are still living very much in their consciousness as a community, in the shadow of the Holocaust, in the shadow of all the attempts to get rid of us. Living as a Jew in the modern state of Israel, I'm acutely aware of those that still would like me to not be here. But it's not something that I personally want to carry around in my pocket on a daily basis. I would much rather carry around the empowerment of what the mitzvot that are connected to Yetziat Mitzrayim, to the Exodus, have to give to me of how I should behave with the rest of the world. Meaning I want that part.
Absolutely. I mean, again, living here, living around the world, it's not like when we can shut our eyes to the threats. But I experienced Yetziat Mitzrayim as a totally empowering experience, one of redemption, one of being able to choose, to be free, to connect with a true covenant to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Everything that's the opposite of oppression, everything that's empowering, and both as an individual and as a people. To live life fully and the most moral way, the most meaningful way. If I ask myself what's the current meaning of everyday Yetziat Mitzrayim, El Motzia Mitzrayim, it's totally in that direction.
Beautiful. Thank you so much.
It's been a pleasure.
I hope you enjoyed this conversation as much as I did. I'm Dr. Yosefa Fogel Wruble, and this is One-on-One Women Talk Torah, a series brought to you by Matan Women's Institute for Torah Study. Thank you to the entire Matan team for their input. Please do One-on-One and Women's Torah Learning a small favor by sharing this podcast with family and friends so that we can reach new listeners. You can stream and download these episodes on Spotify, iTunes, and Matan's website, and write us any feedback at podcast@matan.org.il. That's podcast@matan.org.il. Thanks for listening, everyone.